Good morning. Today on Spotlight, an interview with Dawud Wali, Executive Director of the Council of Arab Islamic Relations, Michigan Chapter. And later on our Sunday morning program, I'll sit down with Thompson, Detroit journalist and Dean of the Pulse Institute. His new book gives insight into the major issues facing this year's political environment. It's Sunday, April the 14th. I'm Chuck Stokes, and this is Spotlight. Have you ever seen a more tense time than what we're living in now?
Well, the only parallel I can draw, Chuck, is right after 9/11. I think this is one of the most tense times that we've had in our country in general, polarized, not just in relationship to what's going on in Gaza, but just the general climate when we're talking about immigration and other things, social economic issues. Has probably been, I think, the most polarizing time in my work, specifically for Muslims. But on a broad scale, I think our country is more divided now than like right at the time of 9/11 for sure.
Which is a great segue into the recent report that CARE Michigan put out in terms of Islamophobia. The numbers have spiked, correct?
Yes, according to our data, the Council on American Islamic Relations nationally, since the 30 years the organization has been in existence, 2023 was the highest number of intakes in the history of the organization, including the year that came after 9/11. As far as the Michigan chapter, we have our own sub-report, and our chapter has been open since 2000. And again, it's been the worst year in our history as well. There was a significant spike, in particular, nationwide and in Michigan in the last 3 months of the year, and we make a direct correlation between what has gone on overseas and in Gaza in particular with the increasement of anti-Muslim sentiment. So for instance, only a few days after October 7th, a Farmington Hills man was arrested and charged with making terroristic threats because he put out that he wanted to kill all the Palestinians in Dearborn, for instance. That's one example, right? Another example is about a month ago, a man was charged federally with threatening to kill everyone in my office, right? So these are actually incidences or issues where we heard about these from law enforcement and or our contact with law enforcement, not necessarily constituents directly calling our office.
This has got to be awfully frustrating for someone such as yourself and those you represent because of the years of hard work that you put in to try to address this issue as well as race relations and interacted with Muslims and non-Muslims to be able to say we're all in this country together and it behooves us to try to get along. But when you put that amount of work in and then you see these numbers escalate like this, it's got to be depressing.
Well, it's a challenge for sure, but again, I go back to we are at an all-time, I believe, high as far as divisiveness in the social political discourse in our country in general. So then when we have these niche issues or certain issues that affect us as Muslims, then there's just a broader toxic environment in which people are quick to react, to demonize people or to dehumanize other people. And this leads to things such as the attack that took place in Chicagoland, where there was a stabbing where a landlord stabbed 2 Palestinian Muslims in killing a 9-year-old, right? And this landlord knew those people, right? For instance, or the 3 Palestinians, Muslims who were shot in Vermont, or then there was a stabbing of a Palestinian in Texas. Threats against our Islamic centers right here in southeastern Michigan, right? But these are individuals, people who I think that are on the edge to begin with in regards to the social political environment that's really toxic in our nation right now.
All right, we need to take a quick little pause for a cause. We'll come right back, look at what may be some of the solutions to what we're dealing with right now, as well as reaction and the impact that it may have on a very big political election year. We'll be right back with Dawud Wali right after this. Consul General for Israel was on our Spotlight program last week, and he was citing the fact that he acknowledged that Islamophobia, as you said, is on the rise, and polling is showing that. He also cited the fact that anti-Semitism is on the rise, and he said there's no place for either one of them. But your thoughts on the fact that it's rising on both sides, and what, if anything, can be done about it? What should be done about it?
Well, I mean, there's a couple of things that could be done. I mean, number one, facially speaking, right, that political leaders and faith leaders, as well as community activists, have to be more responsible with their language, and this also includes policing people inside of our own ethnic communities, inside of our own religious communities, that we can talk about criminal offenses, right? We can talk about certain injustices that take place, but it can't be a total like smearing or dehumanizing of a group of people. So we have to be very careful with our words, right? And the moment in which we cut off dialogue between different communities, then the dehumanization process begins to speed up. But I also say one thing too, right? Definitions do matter, right? So for instance, I don't believe it to be anti-Semitic if someone criticizes war crimes that the state of Israel commits, right? Or to say that, as some people would say, that they believe that the Netanyahu government, or even what called the Netanyahu regime, to even criticize what it's been doing or call what's going on a genocide, that somehow equals some sort of inherent anti-Semitism amongst Arabs or Muslims. So I would say, I think sometimes the definitions do matter, and from our perspective, criticism of illegal occupation, criticism of war crimes, use of white phosphorus, cutting off water, 70% of the casualties being women and children, to criticize that and say that Israel, its military government, is involved in genocide, I don't consider it to be anti-Semitic at all. But some people in the Jewish community do consider that to be anti-Semitic rhetoric.
So along that thread, the USA Today recently did a very detailed journalistic report showing what Gaza looked like before October 7th attack and what Gaza looks like now. Do you believe that this has become more than tit for tat, and that the Netanyahu administration is using what happened on October 7th to be able to commit almost a complete genocide and wholesale killing in terms of Palestinians?
I think that the Netanyahu government, number one, was on its last leg to begin with. There were mass protests before October 7th. People were calling for him to be ousted. So October 7th, in an ironic way, gave him a little bit of time or life support in regards to his government, which is seen to be corrupt and undemocratic.
And you're suggesting that he's using a war situation to help boost him politically in terms of how he's viewed in a country in which he was in political danger, according to many.
Well, he definitely was in political danger, there's no doubt about it. But there's also some other things that we put on that. There's been reporting that there are people or individuals who have already talked about wanting to sell properties in North Gaza to Israelis. Jared Kushner himself said that that area of North Gaza would be very good beachfront property, right, to be able for development. So it is the belief of many people in the Muslim community that Mr. Netanyahu has, in a sick way, used the October 7th attack, which of course we don't condone any attack against civilians, right, women and children. We don't condone that whatsoever, but use that as a pretext for a type of expansionist type of mentality that he has. I believe that man is a complete warmonger, and so he's benefited politically, but even outside of him being political peril, I believe that he's an expansionist war criminal. God forbid if he actually does give the green light for ground troops and ground invasion in Rafah, in that dense area where all the Palestinians are at. It will be an utter bloodbath, and it will surpass the over 32,000 people that have been killed thus far, exponentially.
The role that the Biden administration has played on this very sensitive issue, have they been strong enough? Has he made the right call to action, or has he turned his back on Palestinians and people who may have voted for him 4 years ago and maybe now have the position of he's not the right person to lead this issue and America going forward?
Well, I think that if we look at the Michigan Democratic primary, Chuck, and the unprecedented amount of people who voted uncommitted in the Democratic primary, that was a signal that many people who voted for him in the previous election and part of the base is totally displeased with him. And to the extent that in the Muslim community in Michigan, also in Minnesota and around the country, where there was a high amount of people who voted uncommitted, people have started a movement called Abandon Biden. And now we have talk in our community in which our community overwhelmingly voted for Mr. Biden in the last election. People are now saying that Mr. Biden and the Democratic Party needs to be taught a lesson, and then that if Trump becomes the next president, then so be it, but there needs to be political consequences for what is believed to be political betrayal by the Biden administration and the Democratic Party in general. So we have to wait and see what's going on in November, but I think that he has lost a significant amount of Arab and Muslim votes for the election in November, not just in Michigan, but in Pennsylvania, Minneapolis, and other parts of
and do you see those votes going to former President Trump, who also, when he was in office as president, said that Benjamin Netanyahu did not have a better friend than Donald Trump? So do you see that there would be a vast difference, or do you think people will just sit the election out and not vote for either candidate?
Well, ironically, Mr. Trump has even said that Netanyahu has gone too far, right? And, that he's made matters worse for himself and for Israel. And I'm paraphrasing those words. I think that many people in the community will most likely either vote third party, or they may skip voting for president altogether and just vote for local elections, vote for their state rep, vote for their rep who's going to D.C. and Congress and maybe may skip. There will be some people, of course, who will continue to vote for Mr. Biden, and there will be some who will vote for Mr. Trump as well. But I think that there's talk in our community. I know there's talk in our community about Dr. Cornel West. He's been to this community more than one time. He's met with community leaders. He's spoken in public forums, including in Dearborn, specifically addressing Muslims and the concerns of the community. And so there may be an issue of people just deciding to vote third party.
So there may be protest votes, even with no labels party saying they're throwing the towel in because they weren't able to find a candidate. There will be other names out there that people may vote for, even if they feel they may not have a good chance at winning. It's sort of a protest vote.
Yeah, I believe so. And, I've been asked this question by national, even international media, where they say, well, if Muslims vote for a third-party candidate, isn't that like voting for Trump? And my response is that it is the responsibility of the candidate to earn the vote of our community. So the Muslims should not be blamed if Mr. Biden loses Michigan and thus loses the presidential election, because it is up to the Biden administration to earn the vote of the Muslim community. Muslims can't be politically blackmailed or scapegoated into voting for Mr. Biden. Now, of course, as our organization, we don't endorse anyone. We are a nonprofit 501c3 organization. But I'm just giving you a pulse of the community in general, that people are saying, no, Mr. Biden has to earn our vote. We're just not going to give him a vote again of the so-called lesser of two evils because we didn't vote, the community didn't vote for Trump in the last election.
All right, we'll see what happens between now and November. Dawud Wali, thank you so much for coming in and sharing all these opinions. We appreciate it.